for tuning in for this podcast. I am James Triplett. I'm pastor of Kingdom Assignment Ministries, and I'm sitting here with a young lady who uh, is, you're going to find out, she's a very resilient young lady. We've been trying to get this interview, but it just shows how busy Mrs. Simmons is. But one thing about her, she's like a snapping turtle. When she commits to something, she's going to do it. And I'm so glad that she's here today. She's got a busy schedule, but I've wanted to interview her because she really is a woman on fire and taking care of business in Kitsap County, Washington State, and throughout the world. So I appreciate her being here, and I want you to welcome with me to the podcast here this morning, Miss Tarra Simmons. She's a representative of Washington State. And Tarra, it's just glad to have you here. I am finally glad to have you on this podcast. And like I said, I know the scheduling and all that kind of got in the way, but you said you would be here, and you were here. So thank you for being here. As always, I'd like to start out with a little bit of a background of Tarra Simmons, who Tarra is, a little bit of the journey. And I know you shared some of that, but if you could give us a little synopsis of who Tarra Simmons is and how you came about.
Yeah, absolutely. First, I just want to say it is wonderful to see you and to be here as well, because whether you believe it or not, you definitely impacted my life and helped me become resilient. You and your wife and everyone who I've known through the faith community here in Kitsap County has helped me build resilience. So I'll try to share the story in 2 minutes or less. It's pretty, complicated. There's a lot of twists and turns.
Right.
But I was born to parents who have their own trauma and addictions, and grew up part of my life in Stockton, California, in what I call the hood.
Yeah.
Right. My father is Latino, but it was a predominantly Black community. Then I grew up, and then I moved here to Washington with my mother, who was deep in her addiction, and I, had a lot of violence as a young child. I was sexually abused starting at a young age, homeless by the time I was 13. I had been expelled from school and never went back to regular school, and got pregnant with my first son, Davon, at 14. Life was pretty hard because of that.
Right.
I had cycled in and out of foster care, juvenile detention. I got my first felony at 13 years old.
Wow.
I went to jail, I went to prison, but I also had some periods of success where I was able to manage my trauma and engage in healthy ways, and I was maybe had a healthier community for a while, and was sober. But then I would go back to using, had never gotten drug treatment until later in age when I was in prison. And so all of these different experiences, give me the purpose that I have today, which is fighting for others who maybe have untreated trauma, substance use disorder.
Did it feel like that though at the time when you were kind of going through that?
No, I did not. I did not ever think that I would be where I am today.
Right.
I didn't know the purpose.
Right.
I didn't know that God would use my pain for this purpose, or give me these tests so I have a testimony. Right. I didn't see that in the moment.
Right. Wow.
And so today I got out of prison a few years 10 years ago in 2013, and I decided I'm going to go to law school, because when having that criminal record, I wasn't really able to get employment.
Right.
And I didn't want my kids growing up in poverty, and I wanted to have the ability to provide for them. And then I also saw all these other people with criminal histories, and they were good people, and maybe it's 10 years, 20 years ago, and they can't get jobs either.
Right.
So I decided, I'm going to go to law school and figure out how to change this.
Wow.
Graduated law school, top of my class, with all of these awards, and had done all this work and founded my nonprofit, and they wouldn't let me take the bar exam.
Oh no.
Because of my past. And so I was fortunate. First time in history, we appealed to the state Supreme Court, and they ruled unanimously on the same day.
Wow.
They were so upset, and they said, yes, let her be a lawyer. And so I sat for the bar exam, became a lawyer in 2018.
Wow.
And then I ran as the first formerly incarcerated person, I believe, in our nation to be elected in 2020.
Wow.
And so now I represent the community community I grew up in here in Kitsap County, in Olympia.
Right.
But I'm also able to effectuate change for the entire state through my policy work. But then also I've been in a lot of national leadership programs, and I'm called on frequently to come speak nationally. And on Friday I'm also leaving to Norway with a delegation here, as I'm trying to make the prisons in Washington become more humane and rehabilitated here in Washington State. So.
That's an awesome story. Let me ask you this, Terry. So, in order for you to pass the bar and get through law school, so what I hear is, even when you were dealing with the things that you dealt with as a teenager, it sounds like you were a smart kid in school. That you weren't, I mean, it sounds like you could have been a valedictorian or something like that. So, were you aware of that part, that it wouldn't be a struggle for you once you really zoomed in on what you wanted to do, that you could become the lawyer?
Well, to tell you the truth, when I was sitting in prison, and law students came in and told me that I should go to law school, I did not believe in myself academically to get through it. I did not, because I was the first person in my family to ever even graduate high school. Nobody had graduated. My father got his GED in the California Youth Authority. My mother never got a GED. My brothers and sisters, aunts and uncles, nobody had graduated high school. So I know that I did have success, because when I was 13 and dropped out, and then I had my son at 15 and I went back to high school. I went to alternative school. I did all 4 years of high school in 1 year. And graduated at 16, because I wanted to get on with work and be able to get out of poverty and not be on state assistance and living in a cockroach infested little studio on Montgomery Street in Bremerton. And it was ironic that a neighbor told me about Pell Grants, and that I could go to community college, and if I went there I'd have enough money to pay my tuition and books, and then I got to keep what was left over. And it didn't affect your welfare grant. And that's what made me go to community college.
Wow.
So I went to community college at 16, and I graduated with good grades, and I transferred to Pacific Lutheran University and got a bachelor's degree in nursing, and became a registered nurse by the time I was 21. And so I did have some confidence in my academic abilities. But that was more like math and science. I was always more inclined to succeed in those ways. Writing and reading and comprehension was a little more difficult for me, and I didn't know what law school entailed. And so these law students in prison who came in to help me with my family law issues told me I should go to law school, and I didn't believe then that I would graduate magna cum laude and have good success.
At what point did you start to go, hey, I think I can do this?
Probably after the first semester of law school, when I was shocked at how good of the grades I got. It's a curve in law school, so you're competing against all of your classmates. And I was there with people who had very privileged backgrounds. Like, most people there have family members that are lawyers. They didn't have the level of trauma I had growing up. They had nurturing supports and different, came from, just different backgrounds. And so I thought that they were smarter than me. And so when I, had straight A's my first semester, I was shocked. I was shocked. Leading up to my actual final exams, I didn't know how I would do. So
that's awesome. I've heard you mention the word, and I want to get to the event that you had, but I want to just kind of drill in on this word, because I've heard you mention it. When you talk about poverty, what is some of the worst emotions or feelings tied to that word? Because some people feel shame, they feel guilt. You mentioned it. So growing up in that and experiencing it, what was in your mind saying before you truly knew you were going to come out of it? What were some emotions and feelings that was attaching itself to you as it relates to that word, poverty?
I would say vulnerability is probably the number one thing that I associate with poverty, and that people who are in poverty are easily victimized. I think especially if you're a woman. And so, I would do anything to protect my children. And since I couldn't afford things for them, I was easily preyed upon by men, for example, right?
Right.
And so I think it's vulnerability and powerlessness. And then, yeah, there is some shame associated with that too. But for me, the most significant thing is that people in poverty, we're vulnerable,
Right.
we're powerless, and we also, I would say, commit crimes too
Right.
to survive.
Wow.
Stealing. The first time I stole from a store, I was like 11, and my father had sold all of our food stamps for crack cocaine
Right.
because he was addicted to crack.
Right.
And so I stole food to eat, right? That's
Wow.
my entry into committing crime.
Wow.
And so poverty definitely plays a role in someone's life in a profound way until they learn differently.
Right.
And you can't really heal. One thing I've learned recently is you can't really heal from all of the trauma in your life until you're in a safe and secure environment.
Oh, wow.
And so the more security I've gained for myself, the more I've been able to have boundaries around who I want in my life and who I don't.
You control it.
I control it now. I have more power
Yeah.
because I have financial security.
Right. Right. Wow.
And I don't need to. I've been single for over 3 years, and
Right.
I love it.
Right.
And I also can just make decisions for myself.
Right. But what kind of, since you threw it out there, what kind of gentleman could come into Tarra Simmons' life and you be overwhelmed, bamboozled, and say, oh, maybe we could work with this. Maybe this could become an item.
Yeah. I definitely, I've made my list and I've checked it thrice. And, I talk to my therapist about it all the time. I am definitely not like judgmental about
Right.
your career, how much money you have,
Right.
those type of things, because I'm independent.
Right. Right.
I just want to you'd be able to maybe match me as
Right,
far as like
right.
we buy a house together and
Right,
we pay in
right.
half, or let's be
For sure.
equals. But the person who I imagine I'll spend my life with when I find them is because I do want companionship.
Yeah, for
right?
sure.
Is somebody who is emotionally healthy and
Oh, yes.
can be emotionally nurturing to me, and I'm nurturing to them.
Wow.
That's the most important thing. That's what I crave and need in my life. Is,
Right. But you're not in a hurry, but
I'm
you
not
are
in a
open
hurry,
to it.
But I am very open to it, and it's going to take a while, and I definitely am not settling.
I hear you. So before we get into our questions, I want you to just elaborate a little bit on that event that you had, because I know it's extremely important to you, because I saw the things that you're posting on social media, and I could just, although I hadn't talked to you, I could just sense it, man. This is something that she is overwhelmingly proud about. So could you talk just a little bit about that freedom, I don't know the exact name of it, but that event that you had this past weekend?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Freedom Celebration happened at the Marvin Williams Center on Friday, and your wife was there with me. It was so wonderful to see her, because both of you, are special parts of my life at periods of time.
Right.
So, and a lot of our mutual friends
Yes.
came to visit me in prison. So Pearl Shepherd
Oh, yeah.
and Gwen Darn, those two came to visit me during my lowest time.
Awesome.
So that's why Jewel Shepherd is like my sister, and
Right.
I'll always love her because Pearl's there. But so the Freedom Celebration, it was following my hearing, which was at the Kitsap County Courthouse at 3:30 on Friday, where I was finally free from my criminal record, which keeps people in poverty because you can't, get the same job opportunities or housing.
Right.
Landlords don't rent to people with criminal histories. A lot of landlords don't.
Right.
And could never volunteer my kids at school. Couldn't be the executor of a family member's estate. Couldn't get TSA pre-check.
Wow.
Couldn't go to Australia.
Right.
And you're a representative.
And I'm a state representative and a lawyer
Wow.
and the founding director of a nonprofit. And I've completely changed my life. I haven't done drugs for 12
Right.
years.
Oh, God. Congratulations. Wow.
Yeah. So people, we heal and we behave differently as we heal.
Right.
But these stigmas and labels follow you forever. And it was, I didn't have much hope that I'd ever be completely free
Right.
until my seatmate, Senator Drew Hansen, passed a law before I was ever elected called the New Hope Act, which increased who is eligible to one day have their record vacated.
Right.
And so Friday at 3:30, he became my lawyer and represented me in a court hearing. But our elected prosecutor, Chad Enright, was agreeing to the whole thing. And the judge, Judge Kevin Hull, had been a mentor and a friend to me for the last 10 years. And so it was a beautiful hearing. I think 60 people attended by Zoom, including the justice that wrote the opinion that allowed me to become a lawyer, Justice Mary Yu, very special to me. My friends from Pearl Jam, my brother out in New York, who's the CEO of Lava Records, the founder of Lava Records, and just it's interesting to see my community is filled now with these people with power and money, and then also these people who came to share how I had impacted their lives. I had represented them to get their record taken care of, or their fines and fees removed.
The same thing you were doing for them was happening for you now.
Yes, I supported them in their recovery journey from drug addiction. So it's this such a diverse community of people who I really genuinely love and who have made a difference in my life and helped me get here. And then the courtroom was filled. Standing room only, people got to sit in the jury box and say, this is the only time in history we've had a jury of our peers, actually. Like, my formerly incarcerated friends are sitting in the jury box, and they're like, wow, it's funny. So then we went over and we had a big celebration. And, I think my hope now is to normalize freedom celebrations. And I'm going to have one every year. In fact, I'm going to call Tina now and get it on the books for next year. Because what I'm going to do is have a dance. I never got to play my playlist on there. I had made this freedom playlist, and we didn't understand some tech issues. So I said, I'm going to use that freedom playlist. We're going to have a dance next year. And I'm going to celebrate all the people who I've helped get freedom in the last year. And every year we'll do that.
I think that's going to be good.
And then we can celebrate freedom. Because, I'm still I'm still filled with emotion about this. And I was thinking today when I was driving here, I'm free from all those legal restrictions now. I can volunteer in my grandkids' school one day if I ever get some grandkids. I hope so. I can get a job based on my qualifications and my own merits. But I was thinking, this also has impacted me in other ways that people don't necessarily understand. I always limited who I can date. Because I felt like I could only date men who have also had this life experience of incarceration. Now I'm like, why do I limit myself in those ways?
There you go.
Why do I think my only community of support can be the formerly incarcerated community? Because what I've recognized within my own community of people who have shared lived experiences is, yes, it's great because we don't have to explain. We know. But also, there's a lot of untreated trauma in my community. And as I grow healthier, and as I gain more power, maybe more financial security, I know why my friends haven't been able to yet because of all these barriers. But I also keep going back to my community to be the ones to, invest in my spirit and encourage me. Maybe they can't a lot of times. And so I limit myself in so many ways, and I'm walking between these different worlds, and I never feel really included in the legislature because I'm the first and only. But I also am, seeing the power dynamics with myself in my own community now. That prohibits just genuine, authentic friendship and connection. And it's been hard for me to find places where I can find equally yoked kind of communities.
That balance is what you're saying. I like that you've been using the word community. I like that you've been using the word invest. And we all know that life is a circle. Things always come back around. And I think about my own journey as we were impacted by the man who founded Emmanuel Church, the man who founded the center that you just had your celebration in. That I was there as one of his mentees for years. I am here. So what did Bishop Pastor Lawrence Robertson, some people call him Larry, how did he impact your life?
Well, I'll tell you.
And I know we can't tell it all in this one setting.
I know. I'll tell you, Bishop, he loved me, and I felt like he was, somebody who did invest in me, right? and he really cared. And I remember when I was in my deepest, darkest days in addiction, he's the one that would pick up the phone and call me and say, come home, you know.
Wow.
And when I was in prison, he sent, you know, elders to visit me to make sure I had encouragement,
Right.
and wrote to me. And also, I will tell you, when I was in work release, he hired me. I just saw Ruben. I said, Ruben was my boss, and I was not good at that job at all. Like January, February, out in the trenches, cutting down the trees of what would now become the Marvin Williams Center. Right? I was not skilled to do that. I was not skilled to do that.
Right.
But Bishop wanted to make sure I had a job.
Right.
That I was paid to do. So that was the only way I could leave the work release center.
Right. Is you had to do that particular piece. Yeah.
And then see my kids on the weekend. That was the only way I could see my kids on the weekend, is if I had a job. And so he made sure I had a job, you know. But it was all the other things too, including me, and making sure that after church on Sundays, you know, that I was invited to wherever the food was.
Yeah.
You know, the peach cobbler, macaroni and cheese, and you know, all the good stuff. Right.
Yeah. Stuff we're trying to get away from now.
Yes. So I'm trying to eat vegetables and protein and, you know, take care of myself. Yes. But always making sure I was included, speaking life into me.
Wow.
You know.
That's awesome. So when we talk about success is different for all of us, for everyone. What is the biggest factor that has helped you be successful?
I think the biggest factor has been, honestly, access to, you know, trauma healing, mental health, because without that, I can't do anything. Without that, I can't stay, you know, clean from drugs. I can't be my best self when I show up at school or throughout my career. And so, you know, trauma recovery has been the most important thing. And, you know, having people who I can trust and believe in, and who are, you know, pouring into my spirit, is part of that journey. And there's been so many people that have done that. So.
What, and you've got already talked about this, how do you push through hard, tough times? Because we honestly know your struggle.
Yeah.
How do you push through it?
I still have tough times, believe it or not. They're not as, you know, serious, or, you know, I know now. So the way I really push through is now I look back and I'm like, I got through real hard times.
Right.
Like sitting in prison.
Right.
There's nothing worse than that, when you can't call your kids and find out how they're doing, and you are completely powerless. I have a pretty good rate of getting through each day now, you know, without the use of drugs, and getting through it and still coming out the other side. And so I lean on that resilience that I've made it through things. And then now I know, even if I have big feelings today about a certain situation, you know, I'm gonna make it through. And so I reach out to good friends and talk to them and get encouragement, and just remember and that I'm gonna make it through. And so I do pray, and I do listen to Christian music. I don't go to any organized church anymore. And it was hard for me. It was it's more about political stuff, to tell you the truth. I'm a very open person to our LGBTQ community as well. And so you know, it was hard. And so, but I still believe in God. And I still pray, and I still listen to Christian music, and I still know that God's going to get me through. And so that's what I lean on as well.
What's the hardest challenge? Because I don't think people, and I'll say myself, you know, because I never really, you know, played around with drugs and stuff like that. But what's the hardest thing to fight, that I'm not going to do this again? Because some people don't know that struggle, you know what I'm saying?
Well, I mean, for me, it's just gotten a lot easier over time, right?
Gotcha.
Like, I've literally been somewhere recently where I saw somebody using right in front of me, and I was like, I am not tempted at all.
Wow.
Because I know myself now, like, one time of using drugs, I will ruin my life.
Wow. I like that perspective.
I will not.
And there's too much that you've come out of.
I love my life.
Yeah.
I love my life today. I've got a great life, and I don't want to lose it. I have a life worth fighting for.
I like that. So that takes me right to another. What's the hardest decision you've ever had to make? Tarra Simmons.
The hardest decision
That you've ever had to make?
I would say, I mean, there's a lot of hard decisions in my job, in my career, in the legislature, on how I'm going to vote for a particular bill. You know, we just recriminalized drug possession, which drug possession in itself, you know, the act of possessing drugs is not hurting anybody else.
Right.
Now, if they are stealing from people, if they are assaulting people, they're stealing cars, you know, there's a lot of other things that are hurting other people that are crimes.
Right.
But the act of just possessing drugs, in my mind, is indication that that's a suffering person who needs help. And I wish we lived in a world where we had enough mental health, behavioral health available that we could. But, you know, I ended up having to vote for that bill because our community, I represent a district of people who were asking me to do something out of desperation because of the crisis we're in. And even though I don't want to see people go to jail, there is not a functioning alternative. So I would say that, and I would say the other thing that was really hard is I had to make a decision to end my marriage because my ex-husband, this was 3 years ago, because my ex-husband was suffering with substance use disorder, and I had tried twice to get him through treatment, but the behaviors associated with that and the abuse, you know, to myself and my sons, and you know, but at that time I had, you know, gotten married in the church, and like, this is a covenant, I will never leave, and
till death do us part.
Till death do us part. But now I find like those kind of words are also can be harmful because women in particular stay in abusive relationships because we believe that. So I had to undo that own thinking in my head and say, you know, I've tried. I'm a state representative now. I'm a lawyer. I've built this life. I don't want to lose this. I can't continue to do this. And so it was really hard to come to that decision.
Oh, I know it was, because sometimes we can hold true to traditions and belief that we really haven't examined. I know it says for better for worse, but it's been the worst. So what do I do?
Over a period of time, and wanting to make sure that I didn't lose the progress I had made in my own life. And we have to take care of ourselves first before we can take care of other people. And I needed to have that safety and security in my home and peace in order to continue to do the work that God has called me to on behalf of my community, to fight racism, fight poverty, fight substance use disorder. I couldn't do that if it was no peace in my own home.
For sure.
So that was a hard decision.
Okay. So what is the best advice you've been given by whoever you would say gave it to you? But what was that advice, and how did it help your journey?
You know, I think the phrase that I learned in my recovery program around "no matter what" has helped, because, like I said, I will never use drugs again, no matter what. That is a foundation. You know, I've gotten so much good advice, and I've gotten advice from really good people that I've ignored. I'll say, you know, some people are like, you know, you live too transparently. You know, you share too much personal things on social media. And I will say, okay. And also, I'll tell you what, I get 50 messages a week in my personal inbox from people who say, thank you for sharing.
Yes.
Because now I feel like I can do it, or I feel like I'm going to really prioritize my trauma healing or my recovery.
And doesn't it make you want to just keep going?
Yes, and so it does. And so people, there'll be people who I really trust, and I'm like, oh, my friends that, you know, have power and money, and they'll be the people that tell me, you know, you should really tone it down on social media. You shouldn't be so public about maybe your private life. You're at risk of losing your political campaigns if you do this. And I say, you know what? I didn't run to get power
Yes.
to hold on to it, to give more power.
Right. And I want to be myself.
I want to be myself,
Yeah.
but I'm also here in this position
Yeah.
to encourage and uplift others.
Yes.
And I know, without a doubt, that's why God had me do this.
Wow.
I didn't go seeking this.
Yeah.
This came to me. You know, it was out of my own pain and struggle. Like, I didn't want to fight to the Supreme Court to become a lawyer. I just wanted to go past the bar. I just wanted to serve.
I see the resilient Tarra Simmons coming here now.
Yeah. I like really
Right.
had a plan to just like serve poor people in Kitsap County on legal issues when I went to law school.
Yeah.
I did not anticipate having to fight to the Supreme Court, which was nationally publicized, right? And I did not ask to go become a legislator. It was the representative who was leaving who said, I'm not leaving unless you run. And she was 77 and she needed to retire, and I love her. But she, you know, she wanted my lived experience there.
Yes.
And I had not thought about running for office.
See, I like what you're saying because it always ties back to, let's just take out church and religion. It always ties back into God knowing what he wants you to do, and it's always bigger than what you thought. So let me ask this, if you could start all over again, Tarra, what would you do differently, if anything?
I mean, if I could start life all over, you know, I would just be born to nurturing parents. That would be really helpful. I wouldn't have gone through all of this, you know. I would be proud, you know, I loved being a nurse, for example. When my first career as a nurse, I loved just taking care of people. You know, so it would be nice to, you know, be able to go back to the beginning, and I want every child. That's my mission in life. Every child is born with nurturing parents, without poverty, without violence. You know, breaking that adverse childhood experience situation is like my number one like goal and dream in life. And there's lots of ways you have to get to it, but and then I would say, you know, if I had to go back and redo it though, I probably wouldn't. Because, you know, God has used me to impact thousands of lives.
And it's still using you.
It's still using me, you know. And I don't know, like, what's next, because I haven't dreamt it. You know, I just dreamt up the Freedom Celebration every year for other people, right? Like,
it turned out pretty good the first time.
Yes. And so now it's about, like, how can I use my experiences every single turn? You know, when I had to fight to become a lawyer, I made sure now we're developing this prison to lawyer pipeline, you know, that's building more infrastructure. When I had to learn how to go advocate for my needs in Olympia, you know, I built the nonprofit Civil Survival so I could teach other people how to share their stories and how to connect with legislators, not just here in Kitsap County, but across the state, you know, and across the nation. And same with the prison to lawyer pipeline. It's not, you know, just localized anymore. That's a national thing. You know, now I'm dreaming about, you know, how do I get more formerly incarcerated people elected to office?
Oh, wow, that's good.
Because it's lonely being the only person. And we've only got, as far as I know, 4 states now. Just over the last 3 years, I've been able to help support other people in other states. And so, you know, right now we have 2 formerly incarcerated women running locally. One's been my friend for 10 years. The other, well, both of them, my friend for 10 years. Both, you know, I met in recovery programs and in church programs. And then both of them have been connected to my nonprofit. One was previously my campaign manager there, running for city council and school board. You know, but how can I grow the bench? Because when people have these lived experiences and then they get into positions of power, like I can retire and go live my life just in
Get that
peace.
cruise ship.
Yeah, on the cruise ship in peace, you know. So that's a dream, you know, but I wouldn't change it now.
Wow, because really it helped shape the person that's sitting before me today. So we're going to do a kind of a bucket list round, a fast round, and then we will close out. You can look into that camera and share whatever you want to say. What is your biggest regret in life?
My biggest regret probably is the harm I caused to my children through my addiction, separation from them.
What are you most thankful for?
Well, I'm most thankful that they have never been incarcerated. They're 20 and 30, and they're doing amazing. My 30-year-old is, you know, doing maintenance around the region for McDonald's companies. My younger son is a brand new Marine reservist
Wow.
and just got hired in the shipyard as a federal security guard. And I think
wow.
today is doing his physical test. So he's done all the tests, so he starts soon, but he's going to become a law enforcement officer.
Inside the shipyard?
Well,
Or-
that's what his long-term goal.
Oh,
He's
gotcha.
going to be a security guard first.
Right.
He's not 21 yet, so
Yeah.
he couldn't even go to training to become a cop yet. So he, has been filling his time with these other things. But that's what I'm most thankful for is my kids,
Yeah.
even despite everything, have turned out really amazing.
Have you ever dined and dashed at a restaurant?
Dined and dashed. I have not. That's
What?
one thing I haven't done.
I'm
I've
surprised.
stolen. I know. I've stolen, but I have not dined and dashed. No.
Would you rather have endless money or endless love?
Endless love.
Would you rather have a Beyonce song or a Taylor Swift song stuck in your head for 24 hours?
Beyonce.
Would you rather someone always tell you the truth or protect your feelings?
Tell me the truth.
Okay. If you were trapped on a desert island with one friend, think about this. Who would you choose? Who would you invite?
One friend, it might be Cynthia Brady because she's someone who I've known for 30 years and who always speaks life into my spirit.
You heard that, Cynthia. So
Yes, Cynthia.
if somebody else shows up, what advice would the Tarra Simmons who's sitting before me today give the Tarra Simmons who was 13 years old? What would you say to that young lady today?
I would tell her that she is enough and that she is loved and that God's going to put her through a lot of pain and suffering, but at the end, it's going to all be for a purpose.
Wow.
And to just get protection around her to weather the storms.
Thank you for tuning in to this podcast that I'm sitting here with my friend Tarra Simmons. And I always like to give my guests the last word. So I'd like for Tarra, if she chooses to look into that camera and share whatever she wants to share.
Yeah. I just want to say, no matter what you're going through, we all face adversity in life. Hopefully most of you have not had to be incarcerated, which is a really traumatizing experience, but you're going to go through grief, you're going to lose loved ones, you're going to have relationship issues. We all go through things. We have family members with disabilities. We sometimes worry about how we're going to make ends meet. We experience racism, ableism, sexism from a world that's imperfect. But I hope that you find your purpose. I hope you find your people who are going to help you through those times because I do believe God has a purpose for all of us. And whether that means being a caretaker of the next generation, a photographer, an artist, a politician, a lawyer, a nurse, a pastor, whatever you do, you're making a contribution, and I want you to stay encouraged and know that you'll get through it. Never give up.
Thank you, Tarra. I couldn't have said it better. We'll see you guys on the next